They thought he was just another old man sipping coffee on a porch. But behind those quiet eyes was a story no one bothered to ask about. What will happen when that story finally pushes back? Let us know in the comment section below. And if you're watching with your family, tell us where you're tuning in from as we honor a true American hero in this unforgettable story. Frank Delaney didn't look like much anymore. His frame had thinned out with age, a once imposing silhouette now draped in worn flannel and faded denim. But his eyes? They hadn't lost a thing. Sharp, still battlefield sharp. The kind of eyes that scanned rooftops out of habit, the kind that flinched, barely perceptible, at the distant pop of a car backfiring, calculating the sound, calculating distance, gauging threat. To most of Willow Creek, Frank was just the quiet old-timer with the Bronze Star ball cap and a porch swing that creaked with the rhythm of old bones and memories. Kids would see him outside his modest brick home, petting his old mutt Scout, and barely give him a glance. The older folks knew his name from town council meetings in the VFW hall, but they rarely asked about the framed photo on his mantel, the one of a younger Frank, sleeves rolled, helmet tucked under one arm, standing beside a UH-1 Huey chopper with Delaney's Angels scrawled in red just beneath the cockpit glass. Frank didn't offer the story, and no one asked. He liked it that way. Until recently. It started small. Laughter where there shouldn't be laughter. Late at night, engines revving too close to residential streets. First, there were just a couple of them, 3 maybe, 4, leather vests and cheap beer breath, leaning against their bikes outside Chuck's Mini-Mart after closing time. But then they came during the day. Then came the flags, the Widowmakers' MC patches on jackets, the noise. Then came Rex Dalton. Frank noticed him right away. Tall, muscular, with a jawline like a boot heel and eyes that didn't blink. He didn't speak loud. Didn't have to. The kind of man who stepped into a room and rearranged the air just by standing still. The Widowmakers followed him like hyenas shadowing a lion. He wasn't from around here, that much was clear. His boots were too clean for Willow Creek mud, his tattoos too fresh. But his intent, that was already planting roots deep in the sidewalk cracks of Main Street. Frank first saw him at the diner, standing too close to young Kelly knew him, behind the counter, smiling too long, laughing a second too late. The girl flinched, and Frank didn't miss it. Didn't comment either. He just sipped his coffee, the ceramic mug hot against his palm. And when Rex turned to him, smiling, testing, Frank stared right back, no expression. "Old man, you always this quiet or just when you're outnumbered?" Rex had asked. Frank didn't blink, didn't speak. Rex chuckled and walked off, but something passed between them in that moment. A flicker, an understanding. Rex didn't like to be looked through. And Frank had seen his kind before. The gang grew bolder. Businesses started shutting down early. Sheriff Dana Weller, a decent woman trying to hold order with a skeleton crew and 1 working cruiser, started getting anonymous calls from blocked numbers. Kids stopped riding bikes past sundown. One of the Widowmakers tossed a beer bottle through the window of Rachel Delaney's 3rd-grade classroom. The sheriff said it was a coincidence. Kids were in the gym, no injuries, but Frank knew Rachel was his granddaughter. That made it personal. He didn't talk about it at the VFW, didn't call the sheriff, didn't even tell Rachel. But the next morning he took a long walk down into his basement, the one he hadn't stepped into since his wife passed. Moved a paint can, then a box of Christmas decorations, then a tarp. Here it was, an old ammo crate. The lock clicked and dust clouded the air. Inside were things the VA said to throw away. Photos, maps, a journal, 1 worn radio with a dead battery, a blade still sharp, and tucked under a folded jungle camo shirt, a laminated card no bigger than a playing card, worn at the corners. Iron Jack Murphy, CO 239, TH AHB, 1 ST SAV, 1 ST. You call, I answer, no matter the time. Frank exhaled, folded the card between his fingers. slipped it into his shirt pocket. Scout looked up at him with cloudy eyes, tail thumping once. Later that day, as the sun dipped behind the old cotton mill, Frank walked downtown. The Widowmakers were parked in front of the hardware store, Rex standing center, shirt off, cigarette dangling from his lip, tossing a knife into the hood of a Ford Taurus like it was a dartboard. Frank didn't flinch. He just walked up, slow and steady. His boots tapped the concrete like a metronome. "Afternoon," he said. Rex looked up, smiled like a snake. "Well, look who decided to grow a pair." Frank's voice didn't waver. "I'm only going to say this once. You and your boys have had your fun, but this isn't your town." Rex blew out a long stream of smoke. "You gonna make me leave, Grandpa?" Frank didn't answer, just turned his back and walked away. Slow, deliberate, didn't even glance over his shoulder when Rex spat in the dirt behind him. That night, he didn't sit on the porch. He sat at the kitchen table, pulled out the card again, dialed the number with shaking fingers. It rang twice. Then, "Jack Murphy." Frank didn't say hello. "They're here," he said. There was a pause, not of confusion, just wait. "Send me the address," Jack said. The line went dead. Frank stared at the phone, then at Scout. "You better rest up, boy," he whispered. "It's going to be a long week." Scout wagged his tail, unaware. Outside, in the distance, engines rumbled. Not friendly ones. Not yet. Jack Murphy didn't waste time. When Frank sent the address, nothing more than Willow Creek, same house, same porch, Jack was already moving. In less than 10 minutes, the tires of his black Dyna-wide Glide were chewing asphalt along Highway 11. The man didn't care about speed limits or backaches anymore, not when it came to Frank Delaney, not when it came to repaying a debt written in blood, chopper smoke, and the ghost of jungle rot. Jack rode like a man who knew time didn't offer repeats. The Steel Patriots didn't need a conference call or a chain of command. Jack tapped a few keys into the encrypted app only they used: one ping, one location, and one word: assemble. They'd come, every single one of them. Back in Willow Creek, Frank didn't sleep that night. He sat in his old recliner, hands resting on the arms like he was back in a bird waiting for liftoff. Scout slept at his feet, one ear twitching with every creak outside. Frank didn't reach for a weapon. Not yet. That wasn't how men like him fought. Not until it became absolutely necessary. Instead, he watched the security feed from a cheap webcam he'd rigged up with Rachel's help months ago. It covered the street, saw everything. And just after 2:17 a.m. the Widowmakers returned. They didn't knock. They didn't need to. 2 bikes coasted to a halt in front of Frank's driveway. A third hung back. Rex. He didn't get off his bike. He just sat there, arms folded, watching, his expression hidden beneath a dark bandana and the lazy orange hue of the street lamp. One of the bikers walked toward Frank's truck, crowbar in hand. He took 3 swings: headlight, windshield, rearview mirror. Frank didn't move. The second man approached the front steps, a red gas can swinging in his grip like it weighed nothing. That's when Frank stood. He opened the door slowly, quietly, and stepped out under the porch light, not with a weapon, not with fear, but with a long stare and a single command. "Put it down." The man with the gas can froze, not out of respect, out of surprise. "Ye deaf, old man?" the first biker said, kicking the broken glass with his boot. Frank's tone didn't change. "Leave the can. Take your friend. Walk away." The biker grinned. "Or what?" That's when Rex revved his engine. Once, a short bark. The 2-foot soldiers paused. Rex shook his head slowly. Even from the porch, Frank saw it. A signal. A warning. They dropped the tools. Didn't apologize, just backed away, muttering something about crazy old bastards and not worth the mess. Frank watched them leave, never said another word, and once their tail lights disappeared into the night, he went back inside and turned off the lights. Only then did he sit down. Only then did his hands shake. Rachel called the next morning. She always knew when something was off. They had that connection. Ever since her parents, Frank's son and daughter-in-law, had passed in that car crash, they had learned how to navigate each other's silences like a second language. "You didn't answer my message last night," she said, voice clipped but soft. "I was reading." "You haven't read past 9 p.m. in 5 years. Frank smiled faintly. "Then I guess it was overdue." There was a pause. They were back, weren't they? He didn't answer. Rachel didn't push, but her voice dropped lower. "I'm coming by after school. You've got students to worry about. I'm more worried about my grandfather." Frank didn't argue. She had his son's stubbornness, God help her. When she arrived, her jaw tightened at the sight of the busted truck. Frank had already swept up the glass. He'd always been the kind of man who cleaned his wounds before showing them. Rachel marched up the porch steps, arms crossed, her black hair pulled into a tight bun like it was armor. "This isn't working anymore, Grandpa. You can't just pretend it's fine. They vandalized your truck, they've been harassing businesses all over Main Street, and everyone's afraid to talk about it." "I'm not pretending," Frank said, calm as ever. "Then what are you doing?" "Wait for what?" The sound came before Frank could answer. A deep rumble from far off, steady and slow, not like the Widowmaker's bikes, but more purposeful. Less ego, more weight. Rachel turned her head, squinting toward the road. Frank just smiled. "Iron Jack," he said simply. Then more bikes appeared behind him. 4, then 8, then 12. They came in formation, all wearing patches stitched with the same insignia, an iron helmet over crossed rifles, steel patriots, combat veterans every one, some with visible scars, some missing limbs, some with eyes harder than steel. Rachel stepped back instinctively as they pulled up to the curb and lined their bikes with military precision. Not one engine idled too long, not one man dismounted without purpose. The last to arrive was Jack Murphy. Gray beard, burnt leather jacket, American flag patch on the left sleeve, a faint limp from an old injury in Kandahar, but no less dangerous. He swung off his bike and walked up the steps like it was just another day back in Da Nang. "Frank," he said. "Jack." They embraced like brothers, no back-patting, no words of warmth, just steel on steel. Rachel stared at them, then at the wall of bikers standing silently at the curb, waiting for instruction. Jack glanced at her. "You must be the girl." She nodded. "Rachel." He offered a single nod back. "Your grandfather saved my life." Rachel looked at Frank. "You called in a biker gang." Jack grinned. "Combat unit on wheels." Frank added, "Veterans who've got more medals than patients." Rachel was speechless. Jack turned to the others, raised one fist. "Formation! Move out!" The group split, half walking down the street toward the diner, the other half toward the post office and town square. Silent, disciplined. "What are they doing?" Rachel asked. Frank watched them go. "Reclaiming." Meanwhile, at the Widowmaker's bar, an abandoned tire warehouse turned clubhouse on the edge of town, Rex was already hearing the news. His second-in-command, a wiry man with a rusted eyebrow ring, stormed in, holding a phone. "You're going to want to see this." It was a video. Someone from the gas station had caught it on a burner phone, an entire unit of bikers pulling into town like a battalion on parade. Veterans, organized. No patches from any known outlaw crew, just silence, presence. Rex didn't speak. He rewound the video, paused it on a frame showing Frank shaking hands with Jack. That quiet old man. The one who stared him down at the diner? "You've got to be kidding me," Rex muttered. The eyebrow-ringed biker frowned. "You want us to hit 'em before they get too comfy?" Rex shook his head. "No, not yet." He reached behind the bar, opened a locked crate. Inside were files, contacts, numbers. "We've got friends," Rex said. Let's see how patriotic they are when things get dirty. Back at Frank's house, the porch was full. Rachel brought lemonade. Jack declined. Frank sipped his slowly. The sun dipped lower, casting golden light across a street now guarded by men who once protected borders, outposts, and freedom itself. Rachel finally spoke. What if this makes things worse? Frank looked toward the horizon. Then worse will have to meet resistance. Scout barked once at a passing car. Frank gave the dog a scratch behind the ears and smiled. He'd waited long enough. And now they were just getting started. The first fire started at 3:43 a.m. Sheriff Dana Weller woke to the sound of her radio crackling before the dispatcher's voice broke through, breathless and cracking with urgency. Sheriff, fire reported at Old Man Callahan's barn, West Ridge. Looks like arson. Witness says they saw motorcycles fleeing the scene. Same patches. Widowmakers. Dana sat up in bed, already yanking her jeans on before the sentence finished. No hesitation, no coffee, just boots, badge, and her sidearm. Her cruiser roared down the back roads, gravel spitting from the tires, sirens off. She didn't need to wake the town. The smoke would do that for her. By the time she arrived, the flames were already swallowing what was left of Callahan's hayloft. The structure hissed and groaned like a dying animal, its bones charred black under the glow of orange heat. A few volunteer firefighters sprayed water half-heartedly, just enough to stop the fire from spreading, not nearly enough to save the barn. Old Callahan stood off to the side in a flannel nightshirt, his oxygen tank rattling beside him, his eyes shining with the kind of grief only farmers understood. "They did this," he rasped. "Those damn widowmakers." Dana looked around. No skid marks, no tire treads, no license plates, just the mark they always left behind now, silence and fear. Back in town, word spread fast. Frank knew it before the sun even rose. Jack got the message from one of the Steel Patriots stationed on the west edge of town. They hit Callahan's barn, came in fast, left faster. Frank didn't say much, just put his mug down and nodded once. The Steel Patriots didn't ask for orders. They shifted positions like clockwork. 2 riders posted at each end of Main Street, 3 near the school. A few more circled the neighborhoods, always moving, always watching. It wasn't war, not yet, but it wasn't peace either. By mid-afternoon, the town was restless. People poked their heads out of shops, murmured under breaths in grocery aisles, swapped theories on front porches. Some called it a turf war. Others whispered about retaliation. A few said the widowmakers were bringing in reinforcements. No one wanted to say the word cartel, but everyone was thinking it. Rachel left work early. When she arrived at Frank's, she didn't even wait to be invited in. "You saw the fire?" Frank nodded. "What are we doing about it?" Jack spoke from the far corner of the room, arms crossed. "We're not escalating, not yet." Rachel looked between the 2 men, disbelief in her voice. "They burned a man's property to the ground. Someone could have died." Frank's voice was calm, almost tired. "They're baiting us, waiting for us to throw the first punch, make us the aggressors." Rachel's frustration boiled over. "And if they hit someone's home next? What if it's a school?" Jack stepped forward, meeting her eyes. "Then we bury them." Rachel blinked. She saw it in Jack's face. He wasn't speaking figuratively. Frank stood up slowly, motioning for calm. "We'll protect this town, but smart, not loud." Rachel shook her head. "You 2 are planning like it's a battlefield." Frank met her eyes gently. "It is." Later that night, Jack took 3 of his men up to Ridgeview. It was a long-abandoned firewatch post with a clear vantage point of the roads leading in and out of town. He brought binoculars, radios, and a night vision drone. They weren't just waiting anymore. They were watching. Across town, Rex Dalton was watching too. His clubhouse stunk of oil and stale beer, its dim lights flickering under the strain of bad wiring and worse decisions. He leaned over a table, cigarette clamped between his teeth, studying a map of Willow Creek. Red pins, blue pins, photographs. Frank's house, Rachel's school, Sheriff Weller's office. Everywhere the Steel Patriots had been seen posted. Behind him, Vince, the wiry biker with the eyebrow ring, shifted uneasily. "I don't like this, man. These ain't just old vets. They're military. Organized. I saw one of 'em walking perimeter like it was Fallujah." Rex didn't look up, just flicked ash onto the map. "We let this slide, we lose everything. Territory, leverage, fear. You know what happens if we back down now," Vince muttered. "Cartel won't like it." Rex's eyes cut toward him, cold, sharp. "They don't pay us to like it, they pay us to own it." He slammed a fist onto the table, causing the beer bottles to clink. "Tonight we cut their legs out. No more scare tactics. We hit their heart." Vince swallowed. "What's the heart?" Rex smiled without warmth. "The people." That same night 3 men in Widowmaker colors peeled off from the main group and headed into the neighborhoods. No headlights, no sound but the gravel beneath their tires. They parked behind the library and split up. One went toward the elementary school. One headed toward Rachel's house. The third, toward the church. None of them knew that Miggs Rivera was watching from the roof of the laundromat. He saw the first biker before he even cut the engine, saw the way he crouched low behind a row of garbage bins, ducking like a man who knew exactly what kind of trouble he was walking into. Miggs didn't shout, didn't draw his pistol yet. Instead, he tapped a quick code into his radio, 3 short bursts. Within seconds, 2 other patriots, Deborah Dice Jackson and Nate Walters, emerged from the shadows and flanked the biker near the school. By the time the man realized he wasn't alone, he had a sidearm pointed at his temple and a boot between his shoulder blades. Miggs jogged up slowly, gun lowered but visible. "You lost?" The biker growled. "You don't scare me." Miggs leaned in close. "Then you haven't been paying attention." They zip-tied him, took his weapons, and stashed his bike in the woods. Didn't kill him. Didn't beat him. They just left him kneeling in the dark, duct-taped mouth and all. Message received. The second biker never made it to Rachel's house. He was intercepted by a flat tire, a spike strip laid quietly along the old trail that ran beside the soccer field. By the time he hit the ground and rolled, 3 figures were on him. One of them, Frank himself. No words, no threats, just a photograph shoved into the biker's vest pocket. It was of Rex, with a red X across his face. The third biker? He didn't come back at all. By morning, the whole town was buzzing. No one saw what happened exactly, but everyone knew the Widowmakers had made a move. And failed. Frank sat on his porch, watching the sun rise, coffee steaming in his hand. Scout rested beside him, tail wagging once. Rachel joined him, 2 mugs in hand. She handed one to him, sat down on the steps. "They're going to come harder next time." Frank didn't reply. She looked at him sideways. "You're not afraid, are you?" He smiled faintly. "I've flown through flak thicker than fog and pulled bleeding men out of flaming wrecks with one arm. I've seen what fear looks like when it wins." He looked toward the hills where the sun cut golden lines through the trees. "I won't see that here." Rachel nodded slowly. Then she reached into her coat and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it carefully. It was a small pistol. "Just in case," she said. Frank looked down at it, surprised. Not by the weapon, but by what it meant. She wasn't now, whether he wanted her to be or not. He nodded once, then looked out into the horizon. The game had changed. The retaliation had begun. But the war? It was still coming. Jack Murphy stood in front of the town hall's double doors, arms crossed, gaze locked forward like a man about to address his troops. He hadn't asked to lead this town's defense, but sometimes life drafted you back into service when the cause was worth it. Behind him, the Steel Patriots stood in 2 rows, flanking the sidewalk. Their vests bore not just patches, but stories. You didn't wear a Purple Heart into battle again unless you believed in what you were fighting for. Sheriff Weller stepped out of her cruiser and walked straight toward him. She didn't slow down, didn't ask for permission. The sheriff wasn't a woman easily intimidated. even by a wall of bikers hardened by war. I got 2 town council members breathing down my neck and 3 more calling for curfews, she said. Jack didn't blink. They're scared. Scared people don't make good decisions. She planted her boots 2 feet in front of him. And people carrying ARs in public, that doesn't exactly calm nerves. Jack leaned in. Neither does cartel-backed biker gangs torching barns, threatening teachers, and sneaking into neighborhoods at night. You know they're not done. Weller's jaw tightened. She knew, and she hated it. I need to keep order. Jack's voice was steady. We're giving you that. Right now you've got eyes on every corner of this town, people sleeping through the night for the first time in weeks. You think I want my people here any longer than they need to be? We don't play war games, Sheriff. We finish fights. Her radio crackled. Sheriff, we've got reports of armed men near the West Orchard. Not widowmakers. SUVs. Blacked out plates. Could be cartel. She didn't hesitate. On my way. Jack followed her to the cruiser without a word. She glanced at him once, then unlocked the passenger door. Get in. Let's see what your instincts say. When they arrived at the orchard, 3 SUVs were already gone, but the tracks were fresh, deep, recent. A 4th vehicle remained, abandoned, engine still warm. Inside, empty energy drink cans, shell casings on the floorboard, and a map of Willow Creek circled in red ink. No fingerprints, no... Weller cursed under her breath. They're here. Jack stared into the trees, then down at the tire tracks. They're not looking to scare anymore, he said. They're prepping something. He turned to her, eyes colder than a field medic's hands. You need to start evacuating the town's soft targets. Schools, churches, the diner. They're going to go for noise next. Something that gets them headlines. Weller shook her head. We evacuate and they win. We stand our ground. Jack interrupted her with a sharpness she hadn't heard in years. This isn't about pride. It's about protecting civilians. You want to fight? Fine, I'll fight beside you. But if you let them choose the battlefield, you're already bleeding. Back at Frank's house, Rachel was packing emergency bags. One for herself, one for her daughter, Sarah. Sarah sat quietly at the kitchen table, cradling a stuffed rabbit worn down by love. She was only 7, but already knew what the sound of her mother zipping up a bag meant. Rachel knelt in front of her, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. We're going to stay with Aunt Holly for a little while, okay? Sarah's eyes welled with the fear she didn't speak. Is it the bad men again? Rachel hesitated, then nodded. But we've got some really good people helping us. Sarah looked past her mother, out the window where a steel patriot stood under the oak tree, scanning the horizon. Like the man with the dog tags? Rachel smiled faintly. Exactly like him. Frank entered, resting his hand gently on Rachel's shoulder. You're doing the right thing, he said softly. Rachel looked up at him. I want to be here. Frank's eyes met hers. You will be, but you've got someone more important to protect right now. Rachel didn't argue again. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over Willow Creek, Rex Dalton watched it all unfold from a surveillance feed tapped into the town's cell tower relay. Vince sat beside him, chewing a toothpick like it might bite back. They're evacuating. Rex smiled. Good. That means they're scared. Vince scrolled through other feeds. One showed the orchard, one the diner, another the intersection of Highway 12. This town's turning into a fortress. Rex flicked ashes into a beer can. Doesn't matter. Fortresses fall from inside. He picked up a walkie, turned the dial, and pressed the button. Snake, Vulture, you're up. You know what to do. 10 minutes later, the substation, 2 miles outside of town, exploded in a violent flash that lit up the night sky like a 4th of July finale. Power in Willow Creek went dark. Streetlights blinked out. Phones died. Homes fell silent. Inside the church, where evacuees had just gathered under the soft glow of overhead fluorescence, the lights vanished. Panic spread like spilled ink. Children cried, adults shouted. A pastor tried to calm the room. Jack was already moving. He'd stationed 4 patriots outside the church just in case. When the lights died, they pulled out their tactical flashlights, formed a perimeter, and secured the exits. Jack radioed Frank. "Power's out, substation hit. This is it." Frank's response was simple. "Understood. Activating Plan Echo." Plan Echo was Frank's last resort protocol. It meant fallback points. It meant contingency supplies. It meant everyone, no matter their age or strength, had a job to do. Meigs Rivera gathered his squad and rolled out toward the industrial district, where another fire now lit the sky, an auto body shop used as a safe house for patriots. Sheriff Weller coordinated from her cruiser, using battery-powered tech from the emergency reserve, patching in to state law enforcement. But even she knew it was unlikely they'd get help in time. Rex didn't want territory anymore. He wanted a message. By midnight, explosions rocked 2 more locations: the old town hall and a radio tower on Maple Street. No casualties, just destruction. The Widowmakers were making their move. But they didn't count on the town fighting back. At 12:17 AME, a convoy of Widowmaker bikes tore through 3rd Avenue, planning to loop back toward the elementary school. What they didn't know was that Jack had anticipated their route. He and a team of 6 patriots had rigged spike traps along the alleyway beside the park. 3 bikes went down instantly. The others scattered, only to find themselves caught in blinding light as 2 floodlights snapped on. Portable, battery-run, military grade. Jack stepped out, shotgun slung over one shoulder. "No sudden moves, gentlemen." They didn't run. They couldn't. Behind them, more patriots moved in. No shots fired, just precision. One by one, the Widowmakers were zip-tied and dropped face first on the asphalt, left to contemplate the silence that followed the roar of their own engines. In the darkness of his clubhouse, Rex sat perfectly still. His fingers tapped rhythmically on the armrest of his chair. Vince was pacing. They were ready. Rex's eyes didn't blink. No, they were waiting. Vince hesitated. "What do we do?" Rex stood up slowly. "We changed the game." He pulled out a photo from a file folder. Rachel, Delaney, and Sarah, exiting the school a week ago. Vince stared at it, horrified. "You said no family." Rex's voice was cold steel. "She's not just family, she's his legacy." He folded the photo neatly. "Tomorrow morning we go personal." The sun crept up like it was ashamed of what it was about to shine on. Willow Creek hadn't looked this quiet in days. Smoke no longer curled into the sky, but the memory of it clung to the buildings and fences like soot. The streets were empty. Shattered glass still crunched under boots in the alley behind Taylor's Pharmacy, and scorch marks blackened the edge of the town square where the Widowmakers had tried to make a statement. But it wasn't just destruction that lingered now. It was something colder, sharper. Everyone knew the end was coming. Frank sat at the kitchen table, his fingers wrapped around a cup that had long gone cold. He hadn't slept, not really. Just dozed in 30-minute patches between checking the perimeter cams and going over the old maps of Willow Creek he kept folded beneath a drawer of junk mail. Rachel had taken Sarah to a safe house on the East Ridge, far enough away he hoped. Jack made sure the house was guarded. He even posted Dice Jackson at the driveway. Frank knew if anything got past her, it wasn't going to be human. But that wasn't enough. Because Rex Dalton didn't fight fair. And this wasn't going to end with bike chains and crowbars. It would end with someone bleeding. And Frank had lived too long, fought too many battles, to let it be her. Jack came through the back door without knocking. He carried a map under one arm and a thermos in the other. "You need caffeine," and answers. Frank grunted softly, nodding at the thermos. Jack poured, sat, spread the map out between them. "We traced the Widowmaker comms. Not much, some scrambled junk, but enough to get movement trails. They've pulled most of their men to a new staging point, West Ridge, a hollow behind what used to be the Jenkins tobacco barn." Frank leaned in. He didn't need the map. He already knew it. "That ridge funnels down into town by only 2 points?" Jack nodded. "Both of which we've got eyes on." Bob? Jack hesitated. We don't have Rachel. Frank froze. She's not at the safe house? She never made it. Dice said the escort got split on the way out. Diversion on the old train bridge. Explosives, we think. By the time they regrouped, her car was gone. Just gone. Frank's jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed, not in fear, in clarity. They took her. We don't know that, Jack started, but even he didn't believe it. Frank stood slowly, shoulders stiff, one hand pressing down on the table to steady his weight. Then he walked into the den and opened the trunk at the foot of the couch. Inside was the box he kept locked for 40 years. A memory chest, he called it. He opened it now, not for memories, but for war. A .45 Colt wrapped in oilcloth. A service knife with notches on the grip. His dog tags. A map older than this version of Willow Creek, when the roads were dirt and the barn he'd be walking toward wasn't ruins but a training ground for tobacco laborers. Frank checked the chamber of the Colt, full, clean, ready. Jack watched him and didn't say a word. They both knew what this meant. Jack stepped outside and radioed the rest of the Patriots. Mobilize all units to converge on the Jenkins Hollow, code Ember, Frank's leading. The Patriots responded immediately. No questions, no hesitation. Meigs Rivera pulled a caravan of 3 riders toward the west end. Dice and Walters took high ground on the Silo Ridge. Even Sheriff Weller, despite objections from the county, had decided enough was enough. She rolled up in her cruiser, engine purring low, lights off, but her badge gleaming like it remembered what justice used to mean. Frank walked down his front steps like he was back in uniform, like time hadn't turned his knees to brittle wood and his back to iron rods. He wore his old jacket. Didn't matter that it was patched and faded, it still fit. Still smelled like engine oil and rain. At the Jenkins Hollow, the Widowmakers had fortified their position. Barbed wire, barricades made from old shipping crates and upturned steel barrels. At the center of the clearing stood a makeshift throne, an iron bench with chains bolted into the wood, and chained to it, bruised but upright, was Rachel. She didn't scream, didn't beg. She sat still, chin lifted, staring straight into Rex Dalton's eyes. He leaned forward, crouched beside her like a man whispering to a lover. You know, I really don't care about this town, not really. But your grandfather, he made it personal. I was going to bleed it slowly, but now I want to watch it choke. Rachel's lip was split, but her smile still made it through. He's going to end you. Rex laughed, a low, satisfied sound. I'm counting on it. He turned to Vince. Send the flare. A red streak tore into the sky moments later, slicing through the blue with a hiss. It was the Widowmaker's signal to move. But they weren't the only ones watching the sky. Frank and Jack were already within half a mile when the flare burst. Frank didn't flinch. He just adjusted the grip on his weapon and gave a nod. All right, boys, Jack said over the radio. This is it. No one fires unless fired upon. We get in, we get her, and we remind them what a real soldier looks like. Denegius chimed in, voice crackling with anticipation. Eyes on the perimeter, looks like 20 plus. They're armed, but sloppy. No sentry on the south fence. We've got a hole. Jack looked to Frank. Frank just said, we go now. They moved fast. Steel Patriots circled the perimeter, using the old crop rows for cover. Sheriff Weller rolled in from the east with lights blazing. Bait. As expected, several Widowmakers moved to intercept. Gunfire echoed, but short bursts. Measured. No overkill. Inside the compound, Rex turned toward the sound and smiled. Not because he was winning, because Frank had finally arrived. The old man didn't announce himself. He just stepped through the shattered gap in the fence and walked straight into the center of the chaos, eyes fixed on Rachel. Rex turned to face him, gun in hand. You came alone? He sneered. Frank didn't answer. Didn't stop moving. Stay where you are, Rex shouted. Frank took another step. Rex raised the pistol toward Rachel's head. "That's close enough, old man." Frank paused. He raised his hand slowly and pointed the barrel of his Colt at the dirt. "You don't want to do this. You don't get to tell me what I want." "You think killing her will break me?" Frank said, voice like gravel and regret. "But you don't understand men like me. We were broken a long time ago. What's left? That's the part you should be afraid of." Rex's finger twitched, but he was too slow. A shot rang out, not from Frank. From the tree line, Dice's rifle cracked once. Rex's shoulder jerked sideways, his weapon spinning out of his hand. Frank surged forward, dropping two Widowmakers who charged him with fists and blades. Jack appeared behind him, clearing the rear with surgical precision. Within seconds, it was over. Rachel was free. The Widowmakers were on the ground or running into the woods like rats at low tide. And Rex lay on the dirt, groaning, clutching his shoulder. Frank stood over him, gun still warm. "You think it's over?" Rex spat. Frank leaned down close. "It is for you." He turned, not bothering to watch, as Sheriff Weller slapped cuffs on the man and read him his rights. Frank walked to Rachel, helped her stand, and held her tighter than he ever had. The fight was over, but the story? It was just about to become legend. The courtroom was silent when Frank entered. Not because anyone recognized him right away, but because of how he walked. Straight, slow, steady. A calmness in his presence that softened even the most hardened faces in the room. No medals, no uniform, just a clean button-down shirt tucked into old jeans, and that same well-worn veteran's cap pulled down low over his brow. Rachel sat in the front row beside Sheriff Weller, her hands still healing but her eyes bright with defiance. Jack stood in the back, arms folded, nodding at every familiar face that dared look his way. Rex Dalton was brought in chains. Not swaggering, limping. His shoulder was still bandaged, and his face bore the quiet fury of a man who couldn't grasp how his empire had collapsed so fast. The Widowmakers had scattered. Some fled. Others were picked up within hours after the failed assault on Willow Creek. Vince had been caught trying to sneak across state lines on foot, shivering, mumbling something about ghosts in the woods and dogs that didn't bark before they struck. The DA charged Rex with everything they could stack: conspiracy, arson, attempted murder, kidnapping, and with cartel links confirmed through intercepted burner phone messages, the charges would stick like tar. Frank didn't testify for long. Well, he didn't need to. "I served this country for 32 years, he said, voice rough but unwavering. "I didn't do it so men like him could ride into towns like mine and terrorize families. We may be older now, slower, but we remember what honor looks like, and we don't forget how to fight for it." When he finished, the judge simply nodded. No questions. That afternoon, Rex Dalton was sentenced to life without parole. The courtroom didn't cheer. It didn't need to. The real celebration happened after. In the quiet way people looked at each other in the diner again, in the sound of hammers fixing windows that hadn't been touched since the attacks, in the way the children walked to school again, laughing, talking, finally free from the fear that had haunted the streets. Frank didn't take credit. He never did. Instead, he returned to his porch, Scout curled at his feet, a cup of black coffee in one hand, and the warm spring breeze brushing over his face like a second chance. One afternoon, Rachel walked up the path with Sarah beside her. The little girl skipped forward and stopped at the bottom of the porch. "Grandpa Frank." He looked down, smiling. "Yes, sweetheart?" She pulled something from behind her back. It was a small cardboard cutout she'd made at school, a badge with a star on it drawn in marker, and the words "Town Hero" in crooked handwriting. "I made this for you." Frank took it with both hands, like it was made of gold. "Think it'll fit on my jacket?" Sarah nodded. "You're braver than the sheriff." He laughed softly, a sound that hadn't come easy in a long time. Rachel sat down beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "She's not wrong," she said. "You saved this town." Frank looked out across the street. Neighbors were painting their fences again. Kids were playing with sidewalk chalk. The town square was bustling, not with protests or sirens, but with vendors setting up for a spring market. "I didn't do it alone." Rachel tilted her head. "You made the call?" Frank sipped his coffee. "I guess I just remembered something the world forgot. When you've got good people and you give them a reason, they'll fight like hell to protect what matters." Later that evening, a gathering was held in the town square. Not a parade, not a political event, just people. Honest, tired, grateful people. Frank didn't want to go at first, but Rachel insisted. "You'll be back before sunset," she promised. "Just come for the speeches." But when Frank arrived, he saw no stage, no microphone, just chairs in a circle. And in the center, a plaque. It read, "In honor of those who stood when others would not." For Frank Delaney, Jack Murphy, the Steel Patriots, and the people of Willow Creek. Frank stood frozen, a lump caught in his throat like a memory too big to swallow. Jack stepped up beside him, wearing a fresh vest, boots cleaned for the first time in a year. "You knew they'd do something," he muttered. Frank shook his head. "Didn't expect this." "They needed a story," Jack said. "One to remember next time trouble comes knocking." The crowd clapped as Frank approached the plaque. He didn't make a speech, just nodded, removed his cap, then placed Sarah's paper badge beside the engraved steel. And in that moment, Willow Creek exhaled. Days turned to weeks. Repairs finished. The town got stronger, not just in wood and brick, but in spirit. Veterans who'd kept to themselves began attending town meetings. Neighbors started looking after each other in small ways. Coffee for someone who couldn't walk, groceries for a widow, check-ins at sundown. Frank and Jack started a local chapter of the Steel Patriots, but not as a biker group anymore. It became a mentorship program. Young men who'd gotten lost came for guidance. Veterans who'd been hiding their scars came for purpose. They built things, fixed fences, painted homes, listened. One evening, months after the final confrontation, Frank's phone buzzed. It was a number he hadn't seen in years. He answered. "Delaney," he said. A pause, then a voice, older, slower. "Thought I'd call. Heard what you did." Frank leaned back in his chair, smiling. "Well, I had help. Still, you made the call." Frank chuckled. "One call can change everything." There was another pause. Then, "I'm proud of you, brother." Frank's eyes softened. "You still got your patch?" "Always. We may need you one day. You know where to find me." Frank hung up and looked out over the town again. The streetlights flickered on, porch lights glowed, and from the park the sound of laughter, real, unafraid, rose into the air like a hymn of defiance. Rachel came out onto the porch, holding Sarah's hand. "Want to come in?" Frank stood slowly. Scout wagged his tail beside him. "Not yet. I want to hear the quiet for a little while longer." Rachel smiled and kissed his cheek. "You earned it." As the stars emerged, dotting the sky like medals no one needed to polish, Frank Delaney sat beneath them. An old soldier, a quiet guardian, and now, finally, a town's beating heart. Peace had returned, justice had been served, and all of it because of one call.